I should have known something was wrong when the humans started laughing during our military briefing. Not the nervous kind of laughter that species usually emit when facing their extinction, mind you. No, this was different. This was the kind of laughter that makes your secondary stomach clench with unease. My name is Korg Theta 9, and I'm what you might call a sport correspondent for the Galactic Broadcasting Network. Though after today, I suspect I will need to update my resume to include witness to the impossible and survivor of human madness. The setup was simple enough, or so we thought. Earth had been selected for assimilation into the dominion of Zeph. Standard procedure, really. We arrive, demonstrate our overwhelming superiority, the species surrenders, and everyone goes home for dinner. The humans, however, had other ideas. When our fleet commander, Brixwell 7, transmitted the usual surrender demand, the response from Earth was unexpected. "We challenge you to a game," came the transmission from their leader, a weathered man named President Jackson Mills. His voice carried an odd mixture of confidence and amusement that made our translator units work overtime. Brixwell 7, who had conquered 47 worlds without breaking a sweat, actually paused. You have to understand, in all our history of galactic conquest, no species had ever responded to an invasion with a game proposal. What kind of game? Brixwell 7 asked, his three eyes blinking in sequence, a sure sign of confusion among our kind. "Football," Mills replied, as if this explained everything. 11 of yours against 11 of ours. Winner takes Earth. The silence on our command bridge was so complete, you could have heard a quantum particle decay. Then someone in the back started snickering. Within moments, the entire command crew was doubled over with laughter. "You want to play a game to determine the fate of your planet?" Brixwell 7 managed between chuckles. "That is correct," Mills said, his tone remaining perfectly serious. "Unless, of course, the mighty dominion of Zeph is afraid of a little competition." Oh, the audacity, the absolute, breathtaking audacity of these humans. Here they were, facing a fleet that could turn their planet into cosmic dust, and they were essentially calling us chickens. Brixwell 7's laughter died instantly. His pride, already wounded by the unexpected nature of the challenge, took a direct hit. "Very well, humans. We accept your foolish game. Prepare to witness true athletic superiority." And that, dear listeners across the galaxy, is how I found myself standing on a grass field in a place called London, watching the most ridiculous and terrifying spectacle in galactic history unfold. The stadium was massive, holding nearly 90,000 screaming humans. The noise they generated could probably be detected from orbit. They waved colorful banners, sang incomprehensible songs, and seemed genuinely excited about watching their species get humiliated. "This is insane," muttered my camera operator, Fluxbeta 2, as he adjusted his recording equipment. "They are acting like they have already won." I nodded, though something nagged at me. In my centuries of covering galactic sports, I had learned to read crowd energy. This was not the energy of a desperate species making a final, futile gesture. This was the energy of a species that knew something we did not. The Zeph team emerged from their preparation area first. Our athletes were magnificent specimens, each standing nearly 3 meters tall, with enhanced muscle density and reflexes that could track a speeding plasma bolt. They had been selected from our finest military units and had spent the past week studying what little information we had about this football game. The rules seemed simple enough. 2 teams, each try to move a spherical object into the opponent's goal using only their feet. No hands allowed, except for the goalkeepers. How hard could it be? Then the human team walked onto the field. They were smaller than expected, significantly smaller. Our shortest player towered over their tallest by at least half a meter. They looked almost fragile compared to our warriors. The crowd somehow managed to get even louder, if such a thing were possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," boomed the stadium announcer, his voice carrying across the field with mechanical amplification. "Representing Earth in this historic match, please welcome the Human 11. The human players waved to the crowd, some smiling, others looking intensely focused. Their captain, a man with graying hair named Tommy Richardson, stepped forward for the traditional pre-game ceremony that Brixval 7, who had decided to captain our team personally, approached Richardson. The size difference was almost comical. Brixval 7 could have picked up the human with one hand. "You still have time to surrender," Brixval 7 said, his universal translator making his words audible to all. "We do not wish to embarrass you too severely." Richardson grinned, and that grin made my secondary stomach clench again. "Oh, mate, I think you have got it backwards. We're the ones who should be worried about embarrassing you." The referee, a nervous-looking human official named Derek Wong, stepped between them. "Gentlemen, please return to your positions. We will begin shortly." As the teams separated, I noticed something odd about the human players. Despite facing opponents who were clearly superior in every physical aspect, they showed no fear. If anything, they seemed confident. One of them, a young woman named Katie Barnes, was actually bouncing on her toes with apparent excitement. "Flux," I said to my camera operator, "make sure you are recording everything. Something tells me this is going to be more interesting than we thought." The whistle blew. For the first few minutes, everything proceeded as expected. The Zeph team, with their superior speed and strength, dominated possession of the ball. They moved it effortlessly between players, their enhanced reflexes making the humans look sluggish by comparison. But then something strange happened. Despite our obvious physical advantages, we could not seem to score. Every time one of our players approached the human goal, something went wrong. A perfectly timed tackle would steal the ball. A seemingly impossible save by their goalkeeper, a stocky man named Pete Sullivan, would deny what should have been an easy goal. It was as if the humans knew exactly what we were going to do before we did it. "How are they doing this?" Brixval 7 snarled during a brief pause in play. "They are half our size and a quarter our speed." That was when one of our research analysts, Vorp Delta 6, approached with a datapad. His expression was troubled. "Commander, I think we may have made an error in our assessment." "What kind of error?" "We assumed that because humans are physically inferior, they would be inferior at this game. But I've been analyzing their movements and—" Vorp Delta 6 paused, double-checking his readings. "Commander, they're not just playing football. They're thinking football." I did not understand what he meant at first. Then I began to pay closer attention to the human players. They moved with a kind of collective intelligence that was frankly disturbing. Without apparent communication, they seemed to know where each other would be, what their teammates were thinking, what their opponents were planning. It was like watching a single organism with 11 bodies. Richardson, the human captain, called out something in their language. Immediately, the entire human team shifted formation. What had been a defensive stance became something else entirely, something our players were not prepared for. Katie Barnes, who had been playing a supporting role, suddenly burst forward with a speed that caught our defenders off guard. Not because she was fast in an absolute sense, but because she was exactly where she needed to be at exactly the right moment. The ball, which had been under our control moments before, was suddenly at her feet. She danced around two of our defenders, not through superior athleticism, but through sheer cunning. She anticipated their moves, used their own momentum against them, and before anyone could react, she had a clear shot at our goal. Our goalkeeper, Mex Gamma 4, was positioned perfectly to stop the shot. His reflexes were 4 times faster than any human. There was no way she could score, except she did not shoot where he was. She shot where he was going to be. The ball sailed past Mex Gamma 4's outstretched appendages and into the goal with a sound that somehow managed to be heard over the roar of 90,000 humans losing their collective minds 0.1-0. Humans that I found myself staring at the celebration, my analytical mind trying to process what I had just witnessed. These humans had not beaten us through superior physical ability. They had beaten us through superior understanding. How did she know? I whispered. Flux Beta 2, who had been recording everything, played back the sequence in slow motion. "Look at the goalkeeper's feet," he said. "See how his weight shifted?" She read his body language and shot to the opposite side. Body language. These humans were reading our body language and predicting our actions based on unconscious physical cues that we did not even know we were giving. The game resumed, and now our team was playing with a desperation that bordered on panic. The humans, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying themselves immensely. They passed the ball with casual precision, maintained their formation with military discipline, and every time one of our players made a move, they were ready for it. Richardson jogged past our captain at one point and said, quite conversationally, "You know, we have been playing this game for over a century. Did you do any research on strategy? Or did you just assume being big would be enough?" That was when the true nature of human arrogance revealed itself. Not the arrogance of assumed superiority, but the arrogance of experience. These creatures have been refining this game for generations. Every tactic, every strategy, every possible scenario had been analyzed, practiced, and perfected. We, meanwhile, had spent a week learning the rules. The second goal came 20 minutes later. This time, it was a coordinated attack involving 7 different human players, each one making perfectly timed passes and runs that drew our defenders out of position. The final shot, taken by a lanky midfielder named Alex Turner, was placed with such precision that even if our goalkeeper had known exactly where it was going, he still could not have stopped at 2-0 to eye in the stands. Human spectators were singing. Actually singing in harmony, as if this were some kind of religious ceremony. Their voices carried across the field in waves of sound that seemed to energize their players and unnerve ours. "This is impossible," Brixval 7 muttered as the teams prepared for the restart. "We are faster, stronger, more agile. How are we losing?" I was beginning to understand, though the realization filled me with a mixture of admiration and terror. The humans were not just playing a game. They were demonstrating something far more significant. They were showing us what it meant to be human. Every species in the galaxy had their advantages. Some were stronger, some were faster, some were smarter in raw computational terms. But humans had something else entirely. They had the ability to take their limitations and turn them into strengths. Too small, they used teamwork. Too slow, they used strategy. Too weak, they used intelligence. And they have been doing this for their entire evolutionary history that I thought about everything I knew about human civilization. Their art, their literature, their technology. It was all the same pattern. They took impossible odds and found a way to overcome them through cooperation, creativity, and sheer bloody-minded determination. The third goal was almost insulting in its simplicity. Richardson simply walked the ball past 3 of our defenders, not through any fancy footwork, but because he had observed that they all had a tendency to overcommit to tackles. He let them come to him, stepped aside at the last moment, and casually passed the ball to Sullivan Turner, who tapped it into the goal with the kind of nonchalance usually reserved for breathing point 3-0. Halftime could not come fast enough as the teams left the field for their break. I noticed something that made my tertiary heart skip a beat. The human players were not celebrating. They were not even particularly excited. They were treating this like just another day at the office. This was routine for them. This level of tactical brilliance, this perfect coordination, this ability to make the impossible look effortless. This was just Tuesday afternoon for these creatures. I began to suspect that challenging Earth to this game had been the worst mistake in the history of galactic conquest. But the truly terrifying part was yet to come, because as I watched the human team disappear into their preparation area, I realized something that chilled me to my core. They were not even trying yet. The first half had been them feeling us out, learning our patterns, figuring out our weaknesses. Now, they knew everything they needed to know about us, and we still knew nothing about them. The second half was going to be a massacre. If I thought the first half was humbling, the second half redefined my understanding of what humiliation could look like on a galactic scale. The human team emerged from their break looking refreshed, relaxed, and somehow even more confident than before. They were chatting among themselves, sharing what appeared to be jokes based on the occasional burst of laughter. Meanwhile, our team looked like they had spent halftime receiving news of their own funeral arrangements. Brixval 7 had tried everything during the break. Motivational speeches, tactical adjustments, threats of court-martial. Nothing seemed to restore the confidence that had been systematically dismantled over the previous 45 minutes. Perhaps, suggested Vorp Delta 6 tentatively, we should consider that the humans might actually be good at this. The look Brixval 7 gave him could have melted titanium. They are primitives with barely functional space technology. We have conquered civilizations that make their greatest achievements look like children's toys. Yes, sir, but those civilizations never challenged us to football. Before Brixval 7 could respond with what I assumed would be another withering retort, the whistle blew for the second half. What followed was 45 minutes of the most beautiful, terrifying, and educational sporting event I have ever witnessed. The humans came out playing an entirely different game. Where before they had been methodical and careful, now they were fluid and creative. It was like watching artists work, except their canvas was made of grass and their paint was a leather ball. Their first attack of the second half involved every single outfield player touching the ball at least once. They passed it in patterns that seemed random until you realized they were systematically pulling our defenders out of position, creating spaces that had not existed moments before. The goal, when it came, was scored by their goalkeeper. Yes, you read that correctly. Pete Sullivan, who had spent the first half stopping our shots, somehow found himself 40 meters upfield, calmly placing the ball into our goal while our entire team stood around looking confused. How? Brixval 7 demanded. How? Was their goalkeeper in our penalty area? The replay showed the sequence in all its impossible glory. What had started as a routine pass back to Sullivan had turned into a complex series of one-touch passes that somehow resulted in him running half the length of the field. Our players, trained to track specific opponents, had lost him completely in the chaos. 4 to nothing. They're toying with us. I realized, speaking the words aloud without meaning to. Fluxbeta 2 nodded grimly. That last goal was not about winning. It was about sending a message. And what a message it was. The humans were not just better at this game than us. They were operating on a completely different level of understanding. Where we saw a contest between two teams, they saw a three-dimensional chess match being played at hyperspeed. The fifth goal came from a move I am still not entirely sure was legal, though the referee seemed satisfied. Katie Barnes somehow managed to chip the ball over three of our defenders, run around all of them, and volley it into the goal before it touched the ground. The physics alone should have made it impossible, but there it was, recorded for all posterity. 5 to nothing. Why now? The human crowd had moved beyond celebration into something approaching religious ecstasy. They were chanting names, singing songs, and creating a wall of sound that seemed to lift their players to even greater heights. Why are they not stopping? Asked Mex Gamma 4 during a brief injury timeout. They have already won. Why continue to humiliate us? That question would haunt me for the rest of the match, because the answer revealed something fundamental about human nature that all our intelligence reports had missed. They were not trying to humiliate us. They were enjoying themselves. This was fun for them. The tactical brilliance, the creative passing, the impossible goals, all of it was their idea of entertainment. They had turned the defense of their planet into a recreational activity. The sixth goal was a work of art. Richardson started the move in his own half, past to Barnes, who immediately backhaaled it to Turner, who flicked it over an opponent's head to Wilson Davies, who volleyed it across the field to Marcus Webb, who brought it down with his chest, and somehow managed to bicycle kick it into the top corner of our goal. 6 to nothing. Our goalkeeper did not even move. He just stood there, watching the ball sail past him with the expression of someone who had given up trying to understand the universe. Commander, I approached Brixval 7 carefully. Perhaps we should consider that this result might not reflect poorly on our military capabilities. He turned to me with eyes that had seen too much. Explain. Well, sir, we are soldiers. Warriors trained for combat. They are footballers. This is what they do. This is their specialty. It was a small comfort, but Brixval 7 seemed to grasp at it like a drowning man reaching for driftwood. Yes, that makes sense. We would not expect an artist to defeat us in battle. So why should we expect to defeat athletes in sport? Except that explanation fell apart 10 minutes later when I learned something that changed my entire perspective on the match. The human team was not made up of professional athletes. Richardson was a retired construction worker. Barnes was a university student studying medicine. Turner worked in a factory. Davies was a teacher. Webb managed a small restaurant. They were amateurs, weekend players, people who played this game for fun in their spare time. And they were destroying a team of our finest military specimens. I felt my worldview cracking like thin ice under pressure. Everything we thought we knew about humans, about their capabilities, about their potential threat level, was wrong. That if their amateurs could do this to our professionals, what could their professionals do? What could their military do? The seventh goal was scored by their substitute player, a teenager named Jamie Collins who had been brought on specifically to give their regular players a rest. He celebrated by performing what appeared to be a ritualistic dance that had the entire stadium joining in .7 to nothing. Sir, Vorp Delta 6 approached our commander with another data pad. I have been analyzing the human communications during the match. What about them? They are not using any advanced technology. No enhanced coordination systems. No tactical computers. No performance-enhancing substances. They're doing all of this with their natural abilities. Natural abilities. The words hung in the air like a death sentence that we had technology that could enhance strength, speed, reflexes, even cognitive processing. The humans had none of that. They were operating with the same biological equipment their species had been using for thousands of years, and they were still winning. The eighth goal was scored by their defender, a quiet man named Robert King who had spent most of the match preventing us from scoring. Apparently, he had decided that was not challenging enough and had jogged forward to add to our humiliation. .8 to nothing to this point. Something interesting began happening in the stands. The human spectators started applauding our players, not sarcastically, but with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for their effort. It was the most insulting thing that had happened all day. They were treating us like children who had tried their best, but simply were not good enough to compete with the adults. The condescending kindness was somehow worse than outright mockery would have been. Time, called the referee, consulting his chronometer. 10 minutes remaining. 10 more minutes of this nightmare. The ninth goal came from a corner kick. The humans had obviously practiced this scenario thousands of times because the ball moved through a sequence of headers and volleys that ended with it somehow bouncing off two of our players and into our own goal. .9 to nothing. We had scored for them. I began laughing. Not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. Here we were, representatives of a galactic empire that had conquered dozens of worlds, and we were being taught the meaning of helplessness by a species that had barely figured out faster-than-light travel. The 10th goal was scored by Davies, a teacher who apparently decided to give us a lesson in humility along with his regular curriculum. He nutmegged 3 of our players in sequence, a move that involved passing the ball between their legs in a way that was both tactically brilliant and personally insulting. .10 to nothing. 1 minute remaining, announced the referee. Richardson gathered his team in a huddle. I could not hear what he was saying, but I could guess. They were deciding whether to score again or simply run out the clock. They chose mercy. For the final minute, the human team simply passed the ball among themselves, keeping possession without attempting to score. It was a small kindness, but after 90 minutes of systematic demolition, even small kindnesses felt significant. Final whistle blew. Final score. Humans 10, Zeph 0. The human players celebrated, but not with the wild abandon I had expected. Instead, they shook hands with our players, offered words of encouragement, and generally behaved like gracious winners rather than conquerors. President Mills approached Brixval 7 as the teams left the field. "Hell of a match," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture of respect. "Your boys gave it everything they had." Brixval 7, to his credit, shook the offered hand. We underestimated you." Mills smiled, and it was not the smile of someone gloating over victory. It was the smile of someone who understood that this had been about more than football. Most people do at first. But hey, you are welcome to come back anytime for a rematch. We will teach you some tricks. And that, ladies and gentlemen across the galaxy, was how the mighty dominion of Zeph was defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by superior understanding of a simple game played with a leather ball. As our fleet prepared to depart Earth. Having honored our agreement to leave the planet unconquered, I found myself filing what would become the most important report of my career. Recommendation. I concluded, immediate reclassification of humanity from primitive species suitable for assimilation to do not engage under any circumstances. Because if their weekend warriors could do this to our best soldiers in a friendly game, I did not want to find out what their actual military could do in a real war. The humans had taught us something that day, something more valuable than any tactical manual or strategic doctrine. They had taught us that victory does not always go to the strongest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. Sometimes, victory goes to those who understand the game better than anyone else. And humans, as it turned out, understood the game very, very well indeed. A SR ship jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth's blue marble shrinking behind us. I made a personal note to myself. Never, under any circumstances, challenge a human to anything they consider fun. Because if they can turn the defense of their planet into entertainment, there is no telling what they might turn actual warfare into. And frankly, I did not want to find out.